afternoon, everyone. Good afternoon. It's great to see such a lively group here with us today. My name is Paragag Bofi. I'm the Dean of the Graduate School and Vice Provost for Graduate Studies here at Michigan State University. And on behalf of the Graduate School and our various partners throughout our sprawling university, it's my great pleasure to welcome you to what promises to be a thought-provoking presentation on AI and graduate education. As underscored by the Council of Graduate Schools at their annual Strategic Leaders Global Summit in the fall of 2025, AI touches many areas, countless areas in graduate education, and we really need to understand these continuously developing technologies on a day-to-day basis. Central to the Council of Graduate Schools' approach to AI is elevating student success while preserving the human-centered values at the heart of graduate education. We hold this to be true, and our keynote speaker today is very familiar with such an agenda. He's a thought leader on the present and future of AI in higher education, and a thought leader on what transpires with AI in the graduate space. So, please join me in welcoming, not the keynote speaker, but actually Eric Torn, the Associate Dean of the Graduate School, who was a catalyst behind this event, who will introduce today's speaker. Thank you.
Yes, you need to wait a couple minutes first. So, as Perry said, my name is Eric Torn. I'm an Associate Dean of the Grad School, and I'm delighted to introduce our guest, Dr. Wes Fondren, who holds one of the coolest titles in higher education. You can read it there: Associate Provost for Artificial Intelligence, Academic Technology, and Professional Development at Coastal Carolina University. In this role, he leads AI initiatives and oversees the Office of Professional Development and the Office of Academic Technology. Pretty impressive portfolio. Wes is uniquely qualified for this work, with experience in both academia and the technology sector. Even with his administrative responsibilities, he continues to teach, staying closely connected to the classroom and students. For this audience, it's also worth noting his previous role as Associate Dean of the College of Graduate and Continuing Studies at Coastal Carolina, so he's familiar with the graduate space. I first heard Wes speak in December 2024 at the Council of Graduate Schools annual meeting in DC. And as you might imagine, there were several presentations on AI at that meeting, but his was the best by far. It was a 45-minute talk, and everyone who was in there left wishing it had been a lot longer, and we could continue to learn more from him. Well, today we get that opportunity. So, without further ado, please join me in welcoming Dr. Wes Fondren.
Thank you. Thank you, Ray. I want to start by thanking Associate Dean Torn. He has been fantastic. I'm sure that anybody that has worked with him on anything knows how wonderful he is to work with, or he has been for me. He's done the heavy lifting, the medium lifting, the light lifting, all of the stuff that went into this, and I'm very grateful for getting to work with him. So delighted to meet your dean. Snappy dresser. I like the black coat, white shirt, and the green tie. That's nice. And I'm extremely excited to talk to you in particular. And I need to make sure I know who you are to make that statement seem genuine. Can you raise your hand if you're graduate faculty? Okay. Can you raise your hand if you're a graduate student? Okay. Now, this is going to be a weird Venn diagram overlap. Can you raise your hand if you plan on teaching graduate students in the future? Okay, great. Okay, that's what I thought. I thought there was a high probability that a lot of the graduate students in the room intended to be professors and to teach and stuff, because I'm going to talk a lot about being graduate faculty. And so those of you that aren't graduate faculty yet, this will be a discussion of that. I was the associate dean of our graduate school for a few years, and got an opportunity to get into the graduate space in an administrative way. But more than that, I wanted to start out by prefacing it about something about me. So I'm first generation everything, like probably a lot of people in this room, or several people at least, and um, and I kind of fumbled my way through college. I worked in a factory, 3 to 11, with school in the mornings and stuff, and I got through college. Graduate school changed me. Like, it changed my brain. Like, the way that I thought was wildly different after I got my master's degree, and then of course my PhD was next level. And my children are pointed toward graduate school, and their brains work differently in high school and college than mine did. And I genuinely believe it stems from my graduate experience. That the way I was changed affected my children, which hopefully will affect my grandchildren. And so I'm extremely grateful for what you all do that are graduate faculty. And those that aspire to that, you aspire to a great thing, because it is brain changing, generational change that happens. At least it was in my case. And so I'm really tickled to get to talk to you, especially being with people that facilitate that. For you guys have 10,000, 11,000 graduate students. That's unbelievable. That's a lot of generational change. And so I'm really glad to be here. This is not going to be a theoretical talk. This is going to be extremely hands-on. I'm going to drop out of my presentation. We're going to go into some different software here in a minute that you have access to. And I also need to preface it with this. The range in this room is probably vast. If this room is like most of the rooms I get to talk in, there's somebody in here that's still trying to figure out what AI stands for. And then there's someone else in here that could be up here giving the talk, that is a master researcher in AI. And even apart from that difference, you could pull out your phone right now and start reading and searching and learning and be more up to date on certain topics than I am, having spent 2 hours this morning doing it. It's because it is moving so fast and so quickly. And so if I don't hit your exact target where you're at, I apologize. I'm trying to hit the biggest target possible. And so if some of this is old hat to you, pat yourself on the back. If some of this is new to you, then that's exciting for me. Okay, so the reason this is called partnering, and this stems from just a bunch of higher ed talks and stuff. It's this weird place we're in right now in higher ed where students are actually outsourcing. And we're working hard, lots and lots of training at my university, a lot of universities, to try to make a pivot from outsourcing education to partnering with AI in education. And I have a class that my university is bringing up next year called Learning with AI, where we're trying to get them from the very start to start learning how to learn with AI, which we're going to talk about here in a second. But it's this idea of partnership. And in fact, I think I got that on the first slide. That's the big pivot here, is all of a sudden, from the time that the rest of us were in graduate school till today, there's a brand new partner on the scene, and a partner that does a shocking array of things at really high levels, that's learning faster than any of us ever learned. And the big question is, how does we incorporate that into graduate education? There are schools that I have visited that are working very, very hard to eliminate it from graduate education. And if you were at my talk this morning, you know I have an ethical issue with that the market you're heading into, the empowerment that happens from knowing how to use these tools safely and effectively to prevent that for students is a choice that I don't necessarily agree with. And we're going to look at these three areas right here. And again, I know the audience is varied. I am not here to persuade anybody. If you hate AI, oh, all right. That's you're coming to it from where you're at. My dad, I told this morning, I gave a talk at a conference in New Orleans, and my dad came. Dad didn't finish 10th grade, and so academic stuff is not his thing. He came and gave me a hug at the beginning, like he was saying goodbye to me. It was like one of those kind of things. And after it was over with, he came up and he said, wasn't that bad? And I was like, Dad, that's not a great compliment. My first academic talk you've ever heard. And he said, no, I just mean, I thought you were getting ready to talk about something evil and it didn't seem that bad. And I was like, one, I'm your son. Why would you think I was getting ready to talk about something evil? And two, where did you hear that? And he said, well, I read this article in the AARP. And so you may be coming at this from a place of disdain for AI. I get a lot of that in my title, at my own university, at other universities. I get a lot of animosity because I sort of represent AI to a lot of people, definitely in my school. So I hope you'll at least listen to some of the stuff that I'm going to talk about. And a lot of it has to do with how I teach graduate classes and how I use AI personally. And so I hope it'll be helpful to some, if not all of you. I also recognize I have a Southern accent and I'm talking really fast. And so if those of you in the back can't hear me or understand me, just wave and I'll slow down or try to speak with a British accent or something. All right. So partners. Does anybody know, you probably do, who the first person that we know of that stood up and said, that technology is going to destroy society? As far as I know, it's as far back. I haven't had anyone contradict this. Anybody know who it was? Anybody have a guess? I always love the guesses.
Printing press.
Oh, that's a good guess. The Catholic Church, single largest authority in the world by far. At that time, a new media technology came out, and they said that thing is evil. If you use that thing and you start printing Bibles and people start becoming literate and read for themselves, they're going to think they can make up their own mind about theology, and you're going to end up with a church on every corner, which is where I live in South Carolina. There's a church on every corner. And so that's a great guess. Anybody else have a guess? Socrates, 2,400 years ago. And I bet there's probably a historian here that could elaborate on this. Except the technology he was afraid of is the technology some of you are using, a few of you right now, and that was the written word. In his lifetime, it became more prominent. He didn't like it. He thought it was a bad idea. And I spent some time in graduate school learning how to read Greek, and so I went and read it, and he said, it will introduce forgetfulness to the human soul. And it's exactly what it's done. I gave the example this morning. I have 4 kids, and I'm embarrassed to tell you I had to make a phone call from a different phone a few months ago, and guess what I realized? I don't remember my son's phone number. And when I was a little kid, though, I remembered probably 50 phone numbers because I'm old, and I knew aunts and uncles and grandparents and all that sort of stuff. But what's happened over time is that I've said, I don't need to remember that anymore. It's on my phone. It's the same thing you do when you make a grocery list. Anybody here make grocery lists? What's your name right in the front there? Jennifer? Jennifer, why do you make grocery lists? Wrong. I love that answer, Jennifer. That was great. I'm so glad you said that. I don't mean to embarrass anybody for answers, but that's, you write it down so you don't have to remember it. So you write it down so you can forget it. If you didn't have a list, what did you have to do? You'd have to remember it. And that's what he was afraid of. And he called it, one of his phrases was, it will create false impressions of knowledge. Does that sound like AI? Some of the criticisms of AI. And he said it's going to make people think they know stuff just because they can go get it. He could hear 2,400 years ago my students saying, Dr. Fondren, why do I have to know this when I can just Google it? I'm like, that's the false impression of knowledge. Socrates was on to you. Well, this is different. Like, you have been partnering with a sheet of paper your entire life. You say, hey, you remember this, and I'm going to come back and get it from you when I need it. Matter of fact, you've been partnering with your phone a lot. Like, that may be one of my best partners is my phone. It keeps my calendar. It goes to my bank for me. It does all sorts. I partner with it to do lots and lots of things. And this is about partnering with AI to learn. And it's just a different iteration. Matter of fact, there's another quote that's 400 years older than Socrates that said, there's nothing new under the sun. The things that have been will be, and in the days to come, they will be forgotten. Meaning, one of these days, somebody's going to look back on AI and say, oh, that's just another one of those technology things. But what we've got today, it's different. Today's thing is different than all the other ones, which is what the printing press said and all of them. So anyway, so how do you partner in the learning process? Well, I have good news and bad news. The bad news is we have lost all control over learning with AI when it comes to the spear's tip. And by that, I mean the people that are at the front end of aggressively trying to teach are no longer faculty members in some cases. They are the AI companies. And they are aggressively going after your students. They're in their Insta, they're in their Snap. I'm going to show you a couple things here in a minute. And they want to be the teachers. And it's the good news is it's pretty nice in a lot of cases. Like I use it every day to learn stuff. I learned how to code Python. I learned how to do a bunch of other stuff. I learned all sorts of things every day by partnering with AI to learn. And I don't mean outsourcing. And so I'm gonna come back to that here in a minute, but let me talk about what I mean specifically. So the companies have taken two approaches. One approach is to give it away for free. Now you have Chat GPT, the licensed full enterprise version here at MSU, but I'd be willing to bet there's quite a few of you that still use your personal account. If your numbers hold up like the rest of the nation, there's a significant portion of you that are still using your personal account to do your chat stuff because you have a history of conversations in there, or you just don't want to use the MSU one. And hopefully some of you are using the one that MSU paid for. And when you click the little plus sign, or more, you'll find study mode. It becomes an astounding teacher. It does scaffolded learning, where it'll make sure that you've finished one level of learning before it moves on to the next. You can tell it just about anything you want to learn. You can upload an article. You can upload anything you have digital. You can tell it, teach me that. And it'll say, how do you want to learn it? Do you want to learn through narrative? Do you want to learn through question answer? Do you want quizzes? And it will give you so many different types of learning and try to work with you, and it's learning you. And so as you're learning, it's learning that Dr. Torn likes shorter answers. He likes bulleted lists. He likes to be asked if he wants an explanation, but if he doesn't, to move on. He likes frequent questions so that we can move up the scaffold faster. And so it will adapt to you. You probably have heard Sam Altman say this, the head of OpenAI. AI is as dumb today as it's ever going to be, which means it's going to be a smarter teacher next week. And in 6 months, it'll be even smarter. It's one of the reasons that I wanted to point this out is because this is not where we're at right now. It's not just where we're at right now. This is where we're headed, where people are teaching themselves information. I'm going to talk about how that has changed my classroom, because there's a whole lot of stuff I don't teach anymore. I harvest, and I measure, and I curate. And so we'll get there in a moment. But it's not just chat. It's also Claude, which I don't think you guys have the corporate version here, enterprise version. But if you have free Claude, and by the way, I'm not talking about putting anything proprietary in here. I'm talking about typing in a sentence that says, I need to know Einstein's theory of relativity, or explain something really complicated that only you know how to understand, typing that in there and asking it to teach you, or an article that's already published, or something along those lines. And so we're not talking about putting private information in there. Claude is the same thing. I created a little screen video for this one. You just go into the little settings button and you choose learning style. It's the same thing. And it's just adapting the LLM to the learning model to be in this. Oh, there it is, learning style. And so it does the same thing. Everything that you, by the way, don't try to do regular prompting at this point, because at this point it's a tutor. And so if you ask it to do images for you or something like that, it's playing a different role, which I'm going to talk about here in a second. Google has taken a very different approach, similar but different. And Google has made a ton of ground up this last year. Warren Buffett invested $17 billion into Alphabet, the parent company of Google, in December, because he said he believes Google's going to win the AI race. And you have it. You have Gemini here. And I believe coming soon is one of the other tools we're going to talk about that I talked about this morning. I got a little ahead of myself. And they've taken two approaches. One of them is the free approach, and they call it a learning coach. Does the same thing the other ones do. But they've also developed their own learning model, language model, called LearnLM. They developed it with Stanford and Wisconsin, and there was one other university involved in it. I'm going to show you here in a second. And what I mean by that is the brain, so to speak, that's behind it has been fine-tuned to just be a teacher. And so with the other ones that's happening is you have the huge, gigantic brain that's saying, play this role and be this way. This one is saying, at the very core, this is who you are. All you're learning is about teaching. And so, again, this is what Google's approach is try to create these guided learning systems where this is all free, the stuff I'm showing you, but you have the corporate one that'll allow you to go into it as well. Help Me Learn takes you in there. You can click on the left-hand side, and it'll take you to what's called gems. And that brings up the learning coach. This is just the same thing I showed you in chat, the same thing you saw in Claude, the same thing is here. It's just a tutor that's going to help you learn the things you need to learn that you can keep returning to, by the way. This isn't a one-off. This is go spend some time with it, come back, ask more questions, keep returning, playing with it, and it keeps getting better and better. And one other, there's the QR code to it if you wanted to get straight to the learning coach without having to click on a bunch of stuff. One of the reasons that I wanted to mention this, especially to the faculty, and the students probably already know this, is that the other approach that Google has taken is to give their paid one away for free. So MSU is paying the equivalent of $20 a month for you to have a protected, private, single occurrence account here at MSU that's safe. So when you come in through MSU, when you get it through the tech store and you get access through that, it's safe. But individuals can get this if they're college students or graduate students. They're about to graduate and lose the MSU paid account. They can get this, which is $20 a month, which is what everyone else in the world is paying $20 a month for. The students are getting for free. And so they've gone after students. This is what I was talking about with the advertising. They've really, especially in August and September, they laid heavy into the digital space that they thought students were at. And they gave away this $240 a year account with 2 terabytes of storage, and they're trying to woo students into using their tutor and their product altogether. There's the QR code for it if you wanted to share it with a friend, or someone who's about to graduate that would like to have a year of the $20 without losing the Michigan State one. And all I'm trying to get at with all of these are specific examples of what I'm talking about the AI companies wanting to take over the learning space. Can you see how they've invested in this space? Not to be outdone, Microsoft has done the same thing. I didn't put the QR code up for that, but Microsoft is giving away their full Office suite with AI integrated, which we pay as universities about $60 a month, $30 for the Office, and then it used to be $32 for AI. Now it's a little bit less, but they've done the same thing. I don't think they've been as successful as Google has, but all of the major companies are going after students to become teachers and build around this inside their professional development. Like, I'm over professional development at my university. My primary role is AI, and then I have people under me that do the other two things. And professional development has changed dramatically, wildly in the last 2 years. There is no going once a year to a training session, or one in the fall and one in the spring, and checking off the box and putting in your annual report, I went to professional development and I'm good. That's over. This constant learning as tools are being, just here at MSU, there are tools that are dropping all the time that they're providing access to that other people are using. And so if you think about you, not as a teacher, but as a learner, this is an effort to try to meet you and say, oh, you need to know how to use whatever tool you need to know how to use, we got you covered. You have heard a phrase at a conference and you don't know what that is, you can Google it, you can go here and say, explain that phrase to me, which will be, as you'll see when you use it, significantly better at explaining than just a Google search would be, even though Google, as you know, has AI built into it now. And one of the concerns that I hear a lot is that that type of learning will not engage critical thinking skills, that it's not that kind of tutoring. 2 studies came out recently, and I just realized I forgot to put them on the slide, that showed the opposite, that digital tutors were actually more effective at working up Bloom's taxonomy of learning than passive lectures. Now, you may not do passive lectures, but I got to tell you, that's one of my favorite parts of teaching, is going in and giving a talk to a class. And it felt very personal, like when I found out that these tutors I've been talking about actually do a better job than I do. And I'm doing a real-life, real-world field experiment this spring in my class. I've created 28 digital tutors, one for each. I have 28 students, and so one for each student. And I have a folder that I put that week's material in. It goes to that folder and it teaches them. It builds a learning profile for each student. It dumps that learning profile. When they're done, it dumps that learning profile into another folder. And then every time they reopen it, it goes back and pulls that learning profile. So it's constantly updating its learning profile for them. And at the end of the semester, I hope to give it to them and say, look, here's your learning profile. Upload, every time you need to use AI for something, just put this in there first and say, here's how I learn. Here's my learning profile. And they'll have something just from being in that class. But here's the painful part. I'm letting AI teach the Tuesday topic, and I'm teaching the Thursday topic. Now, the students know this. They signed up for it. We told them in October. I reminded them again in January. We've talked about it. So they know what they're signing up for, and it's all FERPA compliant and all this stuff. And I told them, in case you're worried about their grades, that their Tuesday scores will never negatively impact their overall score. It can only add to it. But here's what I'm afraid. You know what I'm afraid of, don't you? Yeah. And so I'm trying to figure out how to evolve in that space where I'm no longer the primary disseminator and teacher of the material, but I am the one that curates and coordinates and harvests and measures and interacts. And I've done this a little bit, and I get excited about the class space. And it's the reason I put this up here, because this is an example you can go play with if you want to. So this is something I use first day of class, and it's not really a debater. It says debater. But what it does is it does 5 rounds of engagement with students about their use of AI. Can you use AI? And then at the end of the 5th round, it provides a transcript that they upload into my class, into our learning management system. And then I get to go through, and I usually use AI to kind of summarize and help me get a feel for what is going on with all the responses. And what it really does, though, and this is the part that's my favorite part of it, is it is 100% a critical thinking tool. And if you play with it and you interact with it, you'll see what I mean. About the 2nd or 3rd question, it starts getting difficult. I was at another university last week, and I was having dinner with a biological engineer who does AI stuff. And he was talking about he couldn't figure out how to use it in his classroom. So I mentioned this, and he got it at dinner. And I mean, we were sitting across from each other, and he did it, and he got stuck on the 3rd question. And he's like, this is hard work. I was like, I know. That's what's so surprising to the students. Matter of fact, I mentioned this morning, last spring I did an AI-based class. It wasn't a graduate student, it was an undergraduate class. And for the first time in 20 years of teaching, I had a bimodal distribution. Like, who has 2 averages in a class? 89 and 71 were my 2 modes, bimodal. And I spent a lot of time in April talking to the students that were in the bottom cluster, and they would say things like, it's just too much work. And they weren't talking about labor. Like, AI had actually taken all the busy work out. They just had to think. And thinking's hard work. I mean, if you play with this, and you'll see about the 3rd or 4th question, it'll really start to ask you thought-provoking questions. By the way, if you end up using it, you're welcome to use this for classes or anything. If you use it, I made a lot of mistakes. One of the mistakes I made was not telling the students. I may call on some of you in class, and so the first time I did it, I got stupid answers that were like, yeah, no, whatever. And then I told them I'll be calling on you, and then I ended up grading it because I realized I needed some kind of pressure point to have them engage with it. And the grading mildly engaged them. I may call on yours in public. I have found embarrassment to be the most effective tool I have in some ways. But this is what I mean by critical thinking. And man, it'll do it for you too. I do it all the time where I ask it to debate me about things I'm thinking about doing. I'll say, I'm thinking about proposing this, fight me. No, I don't really say that, but, I say, like, talk me out of it or whatever. And so transition. So you as learner, your students as learner, partnering with AI, these AI tools that are becoming much more effective at teaching. And there's more than the ones I've shown you. Those are just some practical ones I want to show. But I want to talk about research for a second, because everybody in this room is almost certainly a researcher or plans to do research. Yes, ma'am. Huh? Oh, you're raising your hand as research. Oh, I see. Yeah, great. I would imagine that we have quite a few researchers in here, or people that want to do research or remember doing research for some of the graduate faculty. And I want to talk about that for a second. And this is tricky water, Like, it's one thing to sit alone by yourself and learn how to code Python because, you figured out how to click the thing in Claude to help you. It's another thing to start wondering if you own the intellectual property of the idea that you came up with because you used a tool to develop it. Or it wasn't your idea. You wrote the prompt and then picked from 5 or 6 ideas. And so ownership, pride, the things that go along with that gets complicated when we start talking about research. So why even do it? And this was a little bit of what we talked about this morning. Well, that's what I want to transition to talking about. So, does anybody in here ever watched Family Feud? Do you know the show Family Feud? What's your name? Julie. Julie, you've seen Family Feud? You've seen Family Feud? Okay, so imagine that you get called down front. For those of you that don't know, it's a game show about surveys, actually. And so Julie comes down front, she puts her hand on the buzzer, and the question is, 100 people surveyed. Ask, who wears a white coat to work? What do you think the number one answer is, Julie? Doctor. Yes, doctor. Had you seen this before?
No, I'm just in a Family Feud.
Yeah, excellent. We'll do the lightning round later. So I've probably done this particular slide 400 times in the last 3 years or so, 3 or 4 years. I've never had anybody say anything different than doctor. It's the number one spot, or it seems to be the number one spot for most people, which is a little odd because doctor is not the person that you see the most often wearing a white coat. Like, I hope you don't see a physician that often. I suspect you see a pharmacist more often than you see a doctor. Like just walking by them in the drugstore or places, you see pharmacist or pharmacist tech or whatever. But I never have anybody say that first. Matter of fact, there's a group of people that way outnumber pharmacists and doctors that wear white coats to work that you see probably even more often than that. You know who it is? Butchers. Like when you walk by the back of the grocery store and I've got 4 kids, and so I live at Costco, and so the rotisserie chicken army back there that's cranking out those things, there's probably 30 people back there wearing white coats to 2 pharmacists. And but what's interesting about this to me is the way that our neural network works in your brain. These ideas are connected, and there's an order, so to speak, to them. It's not like an actual space order. It's not like doctors here and butchers over here on the side or something, but we call it psychological proximity, like psychological closeness. Like if I were to ask you to name 3 soft drinks right now, there's a strong possibility Coca-Cola is going to be in your one of your first ones that you come to. And if you're wondering why I'm telling you this, it's because this has big implications for how to partner with AI here in a moment. So this is the model. This is the model the current version of AI is built on top of. LLMs, neural networks. That's what these are. These were neural networks that were built starting about 9 years ago, that were built out, that were developed. We call them large language models of interconnected concepts that have a ranking to them the same way, a dynamic ranking. Like yours can move too. Like if you start dating or living next door to a pharmacist, it's very possible over time that pharmacists may make it to number 1 for you because your brain is dynamic and it's constantly changing, and the psychological proximity is changing or can change. And that it is hard work to work your neural network. I mean, what's your name in the Michigan State? Brian? Brian, if I gave you a sheet of paper and I said, Brian, I will pay you $100 if you can write 30 people that wear a white coat to work, how long do you think it would take you?
First name basis?
Yeah, Steve the butcher. No, just categories of people. Okay, 15 minutes. So I give him $100, and as he's handing me a sheet of paper, I say, you know what, Steve, 30 is probably not enough for what I need. Here's another sheet of paper. I'll give you $500 if you can give me 30 more. How long do you think the second 30 would take? Okay, so maybe a couple hours or something. So you hand it to me, and I say, gosh, Brian, I don't know what I was thinking. I should have asked you this at the beginning. I really need 90, and so I will pay you $10,000 if you can give me 30 more before you leave today, after you've already given me 60. How long do you think it would take to come up with that last 30?
I mean, exhausted.
Me too. Yeah, me too. Exactly. And I appreciate Brian's honest answer, because occasionally I'll get someone in the audience and they're like, it'll take me 10 minutes. I'm like, okay, let's do it. I've got $5. Let's do this. And And what he's saying is, the deeper you go into a neural network, the harder it is. And we don't call it remembering, we call it recall. Concepts are, it's hard, actually the phrase we use is activate. It's harder to activate those neural paths. The more distant they become, the more faint, the less often they're activated, those sorts of things. And that's one of the problems with the human brain. It's one of the things that would be really great if you had a partner that didn't have those deficiencies that we have and could access its entire neural network in order by proximity in a split second. Matter of fact, it's also one of the places that humor comes from. No, you're not going to laugh out loud when I show you this. But I'm going to show you a really, really distant, way back far into the neural network, where's a white coat to work? Can you see the mild amount of humor in that? AI is really good at humor, actually, because it's just an unexpected connection in a neural network very often. The concept's already there, and just an unexpected link causes a physiological response. And so I don't know how long it would take you, but it would take me a really long time to get to polar bear. Matter of fact, to make the humor point, I made a joke that goes along with this slide. Would you like to hear it? It's a dad joke. I'm a dad, so I have to tell a certain number a day to keep my license. And so here's the dad joke. What do a doctor and a polar bear have in common? They both have a white coat, and a visit will cost you an arm and a leg. Can you see the unexpected connection? You get a physiological response. Well, I'm not telling you this to explain humor. I want to talk about the nature of neural networks and how they work. These ideas are connected to each other as well. Doctors and pharmacists, went to school they work with medicine, and doctors and butchers work with knives or whatever. There's all sorts of connections between all of these that could happen. And that's what you're working with when you're working with AI, which makes it really good at some things and really bad at others. I use the analogy sometimes of the hammer. Like, if you know how to use a hammer, you can build a house. If you don't know how to use a hammer and you pick it up and try to use it, you could hurt yourself and other people. And I'll be honest with you, a lot of our undergraduate students are hurting themselves academically because they're using a hammer that they don't know how to use. And matter of fact, I was giving a talk at in Atlanta at a career center and employer, the Georgia Association of Career Centers and Employers. And when I got done, and this is a question for the graduate faculty here, when I got done, all of the Career Center people left, and all the employers stayed behind. And I was cleaning up at the podium, and they were asking questions like, how can I see on a resume if a student actually knows how to use AI, and what kind of questions do we ask in an interview, and those sorts of things. How do you know if they're dangerous with an LLM, or what, that kind of stuff. But the very last person, the very last lady, asked me a really interesting question that I think about often. And I think she was sticking around to formulate it, and she said, I've got a skyscraper full of employees. She was the head of HR for a company. She said, I got a skyscraper full of employees in downtown Atlanta that are slinging hammers. What are you doing at Coastal to create craftsmen? We've got a lot of campuses with we got campuses full of students slinging hammers that don't know how to partner with it, which is part of what I was getting at the beginning, and I'm really going to get there now. And so here's one of the other reasons that you should probably strongly consider partnering with AI for your research. Now, if you ignore most everything on this except this dot right here, 2 zettabytes. 2010, we as a human race, we think, we're creating, estimated, about 2 zettabytes a day. We have a marine science department at Coastal where a lot of our data science people are because we're on the coast. So I went over, talked to one of the data science people, and I was like, hey man, I'm a computer guy, but I have no frame of reference for a zettabyte. Can you help me out? And he said, yeah, let's see, that's about 10 pieces of data for every grain of sand on the planet. I don't know if that's true or not, but I know that's a lot. I live at the beach. There's a lot of sand, and there's a lot of beaches. And so if you think about how much information was being created, that wasn't existing, that was created. How much was being created in 2010, and last year, I believe last year we think it was around 181 a day. So thinking about the volume of information that is created on a daily basis from 2010 to 2025 is astounding. 2 versus 181. Now that AI is generating content, we believe it's picking up speed, that the curve is really taking off. We think, or they think, by 2030 that we're going to be at a yottabyte a day, which is 1,000, about 1,000 a day. How are you going to live? How are you going to live in an ocean of information? Badly? Blindly? I don't know how to live in tomorrow's world without some assistance, without a partner that can help me out with some of that information. Because I will be wading through that information every single day trying to function. And I don't mean to sound pessimistic. I mean to say the tools have been invented to help us deal with that. One of my favorite, matter of fact, I'm going to drop out and show it to you real quick. One of my favorite is one that you guys are getting access to, my understanding is in the next 2 weeks. And some of you probably use it already. And that is Notebook LM. How many Notebook LM users are in here? Oh, wow. All right. Fantastic. So that's great. Let me bring this over so you can see what I can see. So Notebook, the letters lm.google.com. Michigan State has purchased. It's on the, if you go to the website, you'll see that they're talking about it. It just hasn't rolled out. You'll be getting access to this. You do have access. You have access already. They just haven't done the rollout. This is one of the best AI tools around that I personally use. And so I go in here. So my problem is I have too much information about AI that I have to digest every day. And I spend 1 to 2 hours every morning trying to read. I did it this morning. I got up super early and tried to do some reading before I got over here. And it's just too much. It's sips of water from a fire hydrant kind of thing. And so the hammer analogy, if you know what a hammer is good for, you know the problem it can solve. I need to put a little piece of metal and a piece of wood to make them stick together. Hammer would be great for that. This is a really great tool for helping digest massive amounts of information that you're not required to know perfectly. That's important. Like if your boss gives you something and says you have to know this 30-page report, this is not the solution for that. That's not the right hammer. This is a fantastic hammer for the thing I'm going to talk about. So every week I create a weekly notebook, and I create notebooks for all sorts of stuff, but one of the ways that I do this is I create a weekly notebook. And last week I was traveling all week and didn't get to add to it a whole lot. Let's see if there one is. We'll just do this one. And so when I come across an article on my phone or on my desktop or however I get access to information, I find things all the time that I need to know about, and I don't have time to read them. It's in that gray space between I wish I knew about this, but I don't have time to read it, and I dump them in here. If you have the app on your phone, you just hit share notebook and ask which one, and you're done. Like the article is there. You can drop PDFs, you can drop YouTube videos, spreadsheets, sound files, just about any kind of format you can think of. And if you don't have time to go find them, it will find them for you, which I'm going to talk about here in a second. It will do searches for you that I'll mention here in a moment. And usually I end up with about 15 or so over here. And I create ones around topics. Like I have several on the innovations with agentic AI right now, and I have a bunch on developing custom LLMs. When I see articles about those topics that I need to be familiar with, I dump them in there. But this one is my weekly. And what I do, it creates a summary, not helpful. I go over here to audio and I hit the little pencil and I have it create a customized newscast for me that's 12 minutes long. It takes me 12 minutes to get home from my office. And so on Friday, I listen to a custom newscast about the articles that I've picked out during that week that I need to know about. Now, very often what happens in that little podcast newscast is that I hear about an article I need to read. And so it's here. It's there waiting on me on Monday. And those links get checked by Google, and so those are live websites, and so you can also turn them into PDFs. So I create a little podcast here. I didn't even check to see if I had sound in here.
Picture this. It's late, you're deep in the zone, sitting at your terminal. You type a request into an AI coding agent, something standard, like refactor this function or generate a diagram.
Okay, this will be very interesting to you.
For a split second, there's that blinking cursor, and then it just happens. Code streams onto the screen.
So it's a man and a woman that are going to have this conversation that I told them I needed to know some stuff about. this new tool that Claude rolled out last week. You can hear him talking now. It's extremely helpful, one, for the reason I just told you, but also for this reason.
I never stopped to think about the absolute.
Whoa, did someone just break the fourth wall?
Yeah, yes, I did. Hey, I'm here with Michigan State graduate students. I'd like for you to adapt the whole podcast just to Michigan State graduate students and graduate faculty, please.
Hey, welcome. Thanks for joining us.
That is fantastic. Hello to everyone at MSU.
Absolutely love hearing that you're listening with a group. That's so cool.
And we can absolutely tailor this to a more academic audience.
Especially given the source material we're looking at today.
Yes, we're going to lean heavily.
Now, apart from being a party trick, the way this is helpful to me is they talk about things all the time that I don't know about. And so I hit the little button and say, wait. I don't know what conversational amplified prompt engineering is. You're going to have to explain that before you go on. And they go, oh, hey, that's a great idea. We should have thought about to start with. And they'll explain it. Or occasionally I'll put a single file in there. Like, let's say that, Associate Dean Toring sends me a big 50-page report from the graduate deans and says, it'd be really nice if you knew about this before you showed up. I would drag it into there, and in the 30-minute drive to the airport, I would say, catch me up on this. We hired a new president this summer. This is how we did it, the transition. The transition team would send me files that he needed to know about. He had a 32-minute drive from his residence to the campus, and I would create custom debriefing sound podcasts that were just for him, that came with pronunciation guides and all sorts of stuff that got him up to speed. And I sent him the first one, and that night he sent me a message that says, what a world we live in. And I was like, yeah, we build training material this way. We have a handful of podcasts that we just put, the not helpful user guide that some company gave us for their software. We drag that into there, go over and say, create a 3-minute, easy to listen to, overview for staff. And every bit of this is shareable. Like each part of it is shareable and the whole thing is shareable. I use it with my graduate students all the time because I have articles I know they're not going to read. I can assign these, and I know if I say this is an optional reading, that there's a really limited number of students. Their life is full. I mean, their schedule is full, their cup is overflowing. Me sending them extra articles to be familiar with, but sending them a weekly 3-minute podcast with an overview of 5 articles that they have the access to if they need to go read the article later, or they can remember, that one of those articles and one of those podcasts had to do with that, and they can go back and pull the exact article itself. Extremely helpful. Matter of fact, one of the ways that we've been teaching in September, I taught a class of 2,000 for the first time, undergraduates, freshmen, and let's see, here's a good one. And so this is part of what we showed them. So you have a class. Build a notebook for that class. For that week, put your notes in there. Take a photo of your handwritten notes. Unless you write badly, Google can read your handwriting. And a lot of students don't even use handwriting anymore. They type it up or they record it. If your teacher will let you record it, you record the lecture. However you capture, whatever you're capturing in class that week, you dump it in there, and then any articles that the teacher may have given you, you dump that article in there. You're basically collecting everything, every artifact from that week's class that you can get. What you can even do is sit down and record yourself thinking about your notes. You can create just about any kind of file to put in there. So you put it in there. This is not really that helpful. You go over to reports, and under reports, you select briefing document, and then you give it directions. I want a fully detailed set of notes. This is for a college class. You give it all sorts of information that it needs. It builds it. That's what's over here. This is an 8-page. It's not really a summary. It's a collecting and putting together all of it. And so it builds. I think it builds a table in here too for you. Yeah, table for some of the timeline stuff. And so far, we're just collecting information, but right here, they download all of those briefing documents, they dump them into a midterm notebook, then they go over here and they create quizzes. And the teacher said things like, hey, I really want you to make sure you focus on fill in the blank. And you type that in, hey, I need to really learn this information, create some quizzes, and focus on this thing the teacher said. Or you create flashcards, or you create videos. it will create videos from scratch for you with images. Matter of fact, I think I have a couple, where it will build out for you entire videos. Let's see. Maybe I don't have a video over here. Slide decks. This one I find that you have to get a good bit of instruction to, or you end up with something really kind of funky. I go to here and tell it I want it minimal, I want just this kind of stuff or whatever. I don't use it a whole lot for that, but you could, and by the way, I don't ever use this to build my entire slide deck. I use it to see what it would do, and occasionally I'll pull a slide or two out of it, because it's yours once you create it. I was like, oh, I like that Venn diagram, or I like that the way that it visually laid that out. And here's the bad news. What do you think my expectations are for my students once I show them how to use this? You can have it in whatever flavor you want. Audio, video, quiz, flashcards, videos to watch, narrated PowerPoints, mind maps, or you can come over here and have a conversation with it. That's what this is. This is the chat box, where you can ask questions of the data. Now, I don't use the chat for that kind of stuff very much, but I'll tell you what I use it for. And this is where we're starting to get to the research side. About 6 months ago, my partner developed a problem with her shoulder called adhesive capsulitis, which is called frozen shoulder. Her shoulder got real stiff and hurt. Well, I don't know anything about frozen shoulder. I'm not a physician. I don't even own a white coat. And so I thought, I've got to do some homework here. So I went to ChatGPT and I said, find me all Tier 1 medical journals that have anything to do with, just Tier 1, that had to do with joints and orthopedics. It provided a list of like 25. Then I went to here. I created a new notebook. I said, I want you to do deep research for me. And I gave it a pretty detailed prompt there and said, I want you to find out everything that you can find out from the last 10 years on adhesive capsulitis, but limit your search to these journals. And so it went and it found, let's see how many it found. I've forgotten how many it found. There it is. 37. 37 articles from Tier 1 journals about this topic. Now, the great thing about Tier 1 journals is often they'll give a brief explanation at the beginning of what they're talking about. So I have peer-reviewed articles about this topic. I don't care a whole lot about those 37 articles. What I care about is this. And then I went and asked it questions. I said, I'm not a medical person. Can you explain to me? My partner has this. Can you explain what's going on with her shoulder? And it's like, sure. And explained it to me. I asked questions. Then I said, we're going to the doctor next Thursday. We want to meet with an orthopedic doctor. Can you give me a list of questions that I should probably ask while we're there? And they said, sure. You want to make sure that you ask about this. And physical therapy, you want to know about cortisone. You know, well, are they willing to do it? And it gave me a list of all the questions. When we went to the doctor said, who have you been talking to? And I knew he was waiting for Google or something like that. And I was like, well, I used Notebook LM to read up on this. And I did. I wanted to know. And so I created a podcast for both of us to listen to together so we could understand some more what was going on. And I'm delighted to tell you that they have sent her away from physical therapy. It's supposed to last a year, and after 3 months, they said, you're good. You have range of motion, all this stuff. We can't help you anymore. And she said, we've never seen someone improve that quickly. And I had taken to the physical therapist a bunch of questions and said, I'm a partner. What things can I do to help with physical therapy? What things can we do on our own? And we were extremely informed consumers that saved a few months of physical therapy cost. Now, I'm not saying that that's just anecdotal, of course. What I'm saying is that process is available to everyone that wants to pull Tier 1 journal articles. Think about your research. In fact, I should probably do that. I'm finished at 2:30. I don't have time to do it. I would encourage you to open a notebook, go to deep research, find whatever journal articles journals you would like to know from, and type in the most esoteric, precise thing about your research and see what articles it will find for you. Give it a time range. You don't want like from the history of the world. But let me get back and finish this up because I've got something to give you. Let's see, where's my presentation? Here it is. All right. By the way, it's also a great partner for just storage. Creating notebooks around topics that you're trying to store articles and stuff on. You can dump tons of PDF. You can dump PDFs in there. It's a wonderful place. I want to talk about partnering just for a second before we get to the last section. You know this, most likely. One of the best ways that you can be a good partner with this research or learning is learning how to be good at writing prompts. Now, every person in this room writes prompts, and you've probably been through training and you know some stuff about it. So I'm going to go through this first part really fast, and then we're going to look at advanced prompting real quick, because this is about how good of a partner you are. And I know that sounds weird talking about a machine this way, but think of it this way. You are a contributor, and it is a contributor. The better you contribute, the better the results you'll get are. And so I use the Google approved, they like this method too. This is the one they recommend, giving AI a role to play. So when I go into AI, first thing I do is I tell it what I want it to be at that moment. And part of the reason for this is that we're talking about a 3 trillion connection network. And have you ever had a friend that would just walk up and just start a conversation in the middle? They'd be like, yeah, because purple. And you're like, what? And you're like, because purple. That's the reason. And you're like, I have no idea what you're talking about. You're making words, but they don't make any sense. And they're like, a couple weeks ago, you asked me why I like that shirt. I'm telling you now, because it's purple. And you're like, dude, you can't do that. You can't just walk up and say purple. I mean, that's not how this works. And if you don't have a friend that does that, you probably have other people saying to you, what are you talking about? You may be that friend. Well, to ChatGPT, you're that friend. And you're just starting in the middle. And all 3 trillion of these connections are tingling, waiting for you to connect. And so when you just start talking to it, it's got to make sense of what's going on. If you start your prompt by giving it a role to play, you will narrow down the neighborhood it needs to focus its energy on, literal energy, electricity on. And so give it a role to play. This is a hard thing for some students. This requires some critical thinking. The simple version, what's your name? Shane wants to go to Italy. Shane wants to use ChatGPT to figure out how to go to Italy. What role does he want AI to play? There you go, travel agent. It's shocking to me how difficult some of this is for students. To figure out, okay, who would be the perfect person? And they'll say things like somebody that lives in Italy. I'm like, that's the worst person, because they're already there and probably have never, and this requires a level of thinking. This next one really does. This is the continuing to focus its effort. Give it a lot of context. It takes me about 5 minutes to write a good prompt usually, where I sit and think, what is the relevant, pertinent information that it needs to have? And most people are not great at this, not because they aren't good at critical thinking necessarily, but because they just don't know how to partner in this way to say, this is helpful, this is not, this is what I want, this is what I don't want, and really spend the time thinking about how to give it what it needs. And then give it tasks. This is where most people start, by giving it a task to start with. You'll notice I have an S in there. I like to do what's called task stacking, where you go ahead and give it all the tasks that you think you wanted to do on the front end. Like if I went to Shane and said, hey, Shane, will you go to the grocery store with me? He says, sure. And then we get back from the grocery store and I say, and help me remember to get milk. And he's like, man, that would have been helpful before we went. So we get milk, and I say, and don't forget it needs to be 2%. He's like, I don't think you have this down right, like how to ask for things. So go ahead and tell it on the front end. It will be significantly better at you than figuring out what order to do the task and which ones to save time on and how to blend them and extend them. And so just go ahead and tell it all the stuff you want, however you want to get the information back in whatever format. And then if you have any examples, this has changed the way I prompt. I take photos of so many things now. It is so good at pattern recognition, reading images, all that sort of stuff. When you have someone tells me something good that they have, I often take a photo of it because I might need later to upload that as an example for it to use. I have a folder on my computer that's organic writing, like writing I did all by myself. Whenever I get done giving it a task to help me draft a letter on, I tell it, look at that folder and write it in my voice. It is so good at figuring out my voice and writing it the way I would write it. It's really good at examples. Now I want to talk about advanced. Here's where I hope this is helpful for at least one person here. The more you partner, the better you become. And just like with a human partner, the more you interact with them, the more you realize my partner's not good at some things. There are some things that the neural networks are not great at, and you need to help it with your prompt. For example, quality. You have probably had the same experience I've had where you ask it for something and what it gave you back was not very great. It's like, I hear that a lot from people who don't know how to write prompts. They'll say, I tried AI, but it just doesn't give me the kind of stuff I'm looking for, or hallucinates, or blah, blah. It doesn't give me good stuff back. As crazy as it sounds, when you get to the end of your prompt, write a sentence similar to that. I would like for you to think about reflect on what you're about to give me, evaluate it based on the initial prompt, and then improve it one time before you give it back to me. Now, it's going to take it longer. It's going to have to do a loop through it. And if you're spending tokens, it might cost you a couple other tokens depending on the size of the prompt you're asking for. But I use this all the time when I'm concerned about the quality of what it's about to give me. 90% of the time I don't. I just need something. But if you're concerned about quality, think about adding that. One of the other problems is the doctor-pharmacist problem. When you ask it questions, just like your brain, it tries to go to the first few things in its network. Who wears a white coat? Name 3 soft drinks. It does the same thing you do. But you don't want that sometimes. Sometimes you want it to be more creative, and you tell your partner, I need you to be more creative than that. Well, you can be very precise in how you're creative, how creative you want it to be. Proxy confidence is the proximity closeness. How close does it think it is to the original concept? And so 0.75 is pretty high. If you wanted it to get really, really creative, you could say 0.25 or 0.3 or something like that. And you're just saying, this is the amount of creativity in a very precise way here's how far I'd like for you to go in your network. Go pretty far. Now, you might get some weird responses, but that may be what you're looking for. This one has become extremely popular in the last 6 months or so. You want to know what AI is doing. Like, I'd like to know what you did to give me what you gave me. Explain to me the logic that you used to produce that, because I don't want just to get this stuff, I want to understand it. Partnership. And one of the ways you can do this is asking it to provide a level of annotation. Unless you're the researcher in that area, I wouldn't recommend doing high annotation because it will give you pages of explanation. Most of the time, summary to mid-low are helpful for what most people need to just understand the moves that were made. And this one's the easiest one, and I use this all the time. I'll write a really complicated prompt, and then I'll say, okay, write this prompt for me. Improve this prompt. And I'll take the prompt I just wrote, I'll put it into AI and say, hey, I'm about to ask you to do this thing, make it better. And it'll often section it off in ways that it finds it easier to understand. All right, this one's gonna be super fast. Getting better at what you do every day. This is an example. So you can be empowered to do the things you do every single day better, for the most part. I mean, there's some things, if you're making oatmeal or something like that, maybe not. But many of the things that we do, if you can figure out how to partner with AI, you can improve. Here's an example. Keeping up with your discipline. So when you click on this is a Google Gem, a custom Gemini thing. And it's going to ask you, it's a little wordy, and so you may have to tell it, don't talk so much. It's going to ask you what discipline you're interested in knowing about and what time frame. And I have one of these that I use, and I go back and look and see when the last time I was there, a week ago, 2 weeks ago, and I say, just give me the updates in my field in this area in the last 2 weeks. It will go, and if you give it an academic topic, it's going to start with Tier 1 journals. It'll go to the Tier 1 journals, it'll find any articles related to the topic that you gave it, the field that you gave it, and it will create a digest for you with links to the articles. The second section of the digest does Tier 2, Tier 3, and Tier 4, and puts them in a different section, and the last section does news articles, just in case you're interested in seeing if there's news about your particular area. And you can do it daily. You can go in and say, give me everything since yesterday, give me everything since last week, give me everything since November. You can pop in once a month. This is what I mean, though, about I have to stay up on my field, and this is something that helps me, a partner, where I gave it a really long prompt and told it what to do. And I also told it to verify everything before it put it in the digest. And so everything you should see should be something that it tried to verify, and if it couldn't verify it, it pulled it out. And so you still may find some mistakes in there. They're still improving. But this is the kind of thing that I'm talking about improving. And I think I am out of time. Thank you so much for letting me hang out with you and talk about AI. I believe I'm supposed to leave it on that right there.
All right. I know we're at time, but we maybe could have time for one or two questions before we leave. So, anybody have a question for Wes?
They're just going to ask AI. Yes, huh?
Microphone, Eric. Thank you for a really interesting presentation.
Thank you.
One thing that I struggle with is the conundrum of resource use and sustainability for all this stuff, right?
Yeah.
I mean, we're struggling locally with the fact that there might be a data center soon.
Wow.
How do you have that conversation with your students as you're trying to guide them in how to use it and what things maybe to use it for or not?
So I always hate answering this question because I feel like I make it worse. So we do 4 hours of AI literacy training for all our faculty, staff, and graduate students. And most of this because our graduate students, most of them have an assistantship. So basically, anybody that's an employee gets that. 25% of the academy is problems with AI, and sustainability is one of many. Financial, the things that the data centers are doing to some of the poverty areas that they're building these things in is also problematic. You're fortunate. You're sitting in a room where you just heard people talking about AI. Do you know what's happening for most people in the marketplace? There is a gap that's developing between them and the people that are getting AI training that they're going to have a hard time overcoming. We're seeing empowerment not happen equally across the board. I mean, everybody has access to free ChatGPT, but this is different than going in and playing with it. And so I have concerns about that. I have concerns of the fact that these are all companies. Every one of these is a company, and their mission, not to educate, make money. That's it, make money. And I have lots and lots of concerns. That is definitely one of them. I will tell you on a positive note, Google is the best at it. MIT tried to do a study back in the summer on energy consumption by data centers, and Google was the only one that would provide their data. And part of it is, and you may know this, Google has an advantage. Does anybody know what the Google advantage is when it comes to data centers? They don't use NVIDIA chips. They use their own Tensor chips, which were made for their Android phones that are more energy efficient because they're made for mobile. So they're the only ones that don't use the NVIDIA chips that suck huge amounts of power. And what they said was, they told how many kilowatts it was. And so an average prompt session is a 30-second microwave use, is what the MIT study came out and said. And then they tried to estimate about all the other ones, what they were. And so I guess the one silver lining is that they're getting a little bit better. And I think until there's some financial incentive to get better, they're not going to really get better. And so I have serious concerns about that and a lot of other things about it. Yeah.